Hi guys, Bill again. Well, it's another year. It's another winter. And while the ranks of our older veterans is a little bit thinner, there's yet another clutch of social justice wankers. And I think it's just dandy to piss all over their sacrifice and their achievements. People like Ms. Braidwood. Ella Braidwood is a magazine journalism MA student from the City of London. She's from City University. She likes tea. She likes LGBT rights. She likes London. She likes music. Doesn't really like Poppies. Thing is, people tweet mean things to people who publicly refuse to wear Poppies, and that's a bad thing. It's a social guillotine, no less. I'll tell you a wee story. 100 years ago, the second winter of the war to end all wars was approaching. The Second Battle of Champagne had just ended. 217,000 men lay dead to move Joffrey's desk 2.5 miles closer to Berlin. The entire strength of a modern European army was wiped out in under a month and a half. I really wonder if Ella could imagine everyone in Islington dead in less than 2 months. The university she goes to bombed flat. A half again as many people suffering grievous, life-threatening wounds. And that was one battle. The carnage lasted more than 4 years. The shock and the trauma, it staggered our nation. We've never really recovered. We began walking away from empire, and we looked to the way that we ran our affairs internally in a whole new way. I know, it's melancholy, but the great unwashed were no longer a burden on their betters. They were a national treasure. They'd given their all for a cause that they had no say in starting or stopping. Now, before the war, talk of suffrage had revolved around whether it was right to extend voting rights to wealthy women as well as to wealthy men. Well, after it, the British were intent on building a land fit for heroes. And that meant granting a wealth of concessions to the men who'd suffered so badly in that conflict. And women, even privileged wealthy women, had to wait in line while the common man was given his just reward. It's hard to imagine the kind of turmoil and the kind of changes that struck our nation after the Great War. Concepts that were seen as just pandering to malcontents just 5 years before were suddenly popular causes. Things like social housing, the need for a living wage, the need for affordable healthcare, even crazy notions that working people should be somewhat educated. Everything became possible. Now, it wasn't easy. The country was almost bankrupt. And if it wasn't for our North American friends' generosity, we might have starved. Thank you. Now, with goodwill and government funds just weren't enough. Charity had to bridge the gap. In 1921, 4 charitable organisations merged to bring the interests of ex-servicemen together under a common banner. And the British Legion was born. Now, for 50 years it campaigned tirelessly on veterans' behalf, alleviating their suffering, easing their transition to civilian life, even fighting for their pension rights. In 1971, it was granted a royal charter. Now, today, it's the largest and by far the most successful of our ex-service charities, and it's got branches all over the country. Holds a really unique place in British hearts. Now, popular culture, there's even phrases that we use. You say you're popping down the Legion. Well, that generally involves visiting the local branch's bar and sinking a few pints with the old boys. The bar's profit goes to the charity, but more importantly, the Legion is a focus, it's a nexus for ex-service concerns. Now, our armed forces are tiny today. There's less than 150,000 full-time sailors, soldiers and airmen. Most people don't even know a serving member of the armed forces. But their sacrifices are just as great today as they've ever been. Perhaps more so. The risk of getting hit by a car and chopped up by some Islamic fanatic as you lie hurt and helpless on the pavement isn't something that our grandfathers really had to worry about. Now, if you're not familiar with them, this is what I'm talking about. It's a poppy. Beautiful wee thing. It's a reference to the bright red poppies that sprang up around the graves of fallen soldiers in Flanders, and it was immortalised by John McCrae. Now, I think you're probably better off looking for a proper rendition of it, but if you haven't heard the poem, it runs a wee bit like this. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, is scarce heard amidst the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. Now, here in the UK, we took up the North American tradition of wearing poppies to honour our dead and to show faith with the living, and we used the profit from the sale to support those that are in need. The genius behind the idea was Maina Bell Michael. She was a humanitarian from Georgia who volunteered for war service. She dedicated her life to looking after the victims of the Great War. Great lady. It's kind of interesting to compare her with, white feather suffragettes. See, if I were a feminist, I'd be far keener to associate with her than the stone cold, heartless bitches that shamed young men to the death while doing exactly squat for the war effort themselves. Funny old thing though, modern feminists don't even seem to know her name. Draw your own conclusions. Today the tradition of wearing poppies is pretty much ingrained. We know and respect the symbol for what it is. Public figures are expected to wear one if their office has any responsibility to service personnel. Now that means that politicians, BBC broadcasters, any sports celebrities who might end up representing their country, they're all expected to show their support. Regular celebrities aren't. Most do, which is nice. Some don't, but that's okay too. Private citizens can do what they want. Now, I tend to buy them and forget to wear the damn things. My heart's in the right place, but my admin's all over the shop. It's hardly newsworthy. It's a decades-old convention. It's well understood by everybody. And yeah, there are social consequences for defying it. A politician who refuses to wear the poppy is making some kind of point. A celebrity announcing their refusal ends up looking like a petty attention whore. But either way, they know what they're doing, and they know what they're doing is likely to attract disapproval from most people. Now, unfortunately, Ms. Braithwaite doesn't see things quite like that. I've linked an article down below. Apparently, wearing a poppy is a stifling requirement. Stifling. It will result in a tirade of unpleasant tweets if you fail to abide by this dictatorial notion. Fuck's sake. Look, honey, people take a tirade of unpleasant tweets on Twitter all day, every day. People are saying mean things about me on Twitter, even although I've never even had a Twitter account. And you know, better yet, I can't even open one under my own name. I got hit by a block bot a wee while back. Couldn't make it up. The effect on my life? Pretty close to zero, I should imagine. I suppose there must be hypothetical situations where having a Twitter account would be useful. I just can't actually think of any right at the moment. She proves her point by quoting a few harsh remarks that were aimed at Irish footballer James McLean. She forgot to print the messages of support that he received. He received these messages of support for linking a symbol of remembrance to his personal views on Bloody Sunday. That's pretty much her take on the entire subject. She throws in a couple of snide one-liners, insinuating that we should be making Argentine and German visitors to the UK wear poppies, in spite of the Belgrano and Dresden. I mean, where do you go with that? Nobody's ever asked Germans or Argentinians to wear a poppy on precious English soil. Doesn't happen. But she's not getting away with that remark just so easily. She's not fucking Hermione Granger. She doesn't just get to utter some magic words and watch her opponents fall apart. The ARA Belgrano used to be the USS Phoenix. She was a Brooklyn-class 6-inch cruiser. She had 15 6-inch guns. Those things are huge. Using just her main armament, she had numerous secondary weapons as well, but using just her main armament, she could fire 150 130-pound shells every minute at targets up to 13 miles away. Now, a single Exocet could kill a British warship. A 130-pound shell has got similar destructive power. Can you imagine 150 of those bastards arriving in amongst the unarmoured British task force? That thing could have massacred the British fleet. Now, on the 1st of May, Admiral Juan Lombardo ordered all Argentine naval units to seek out the British task force, which he knew was around the Falklands, and launch a massive attack. On the 2nd of May, the British intercepted the transmission. Now, it's something we kept quiet about for a very long time. It didn't make any sense at all letting the Argentinians know that we could read their ciphers. We knew they were attacking on the 2nd, so Conqueror, a British submarine, was tasked with finding her and destroying her, which she duly did. The Belgrano was sunk on the 2nd of May, the same day that she was due to try and find and destroy the British task force. Now, do you think Argentinian sailors are buying into that war crime bullshit? If you do that, then you're a bigger fucktard than Braidwood. On the 23rd of April of 82, 9 days before the attack, the British gave notice to the Argentinians that they would consider taking whatever measures they considered necessary to defend themselves under Article 51 of the UN Charter. Now, the Argentine Rear Admiral Alara, who commanded Task Group 79-3, which was the ARA Belgrano, the YPF Puerto Rosales, that was their tanker, and a couple of destroyers. The ARA, I wrote this down for you, Piedra Bueno, is that how you say that? And also the ARA Bouchard. He said that after that message of the 23rd of April, the entire South Atlantic was an operational theatre for both sides, and that we, the Argentinians, as professionals, thought that it was just too bad that we lost the Belgrano. Shit happens. Walk it off. The Belgrano's captain, Hector Bonzo, said that it would be improper to accept the attack by HMS Conqueror was any kind of betrayal. Now, would an Argentinian civilian wear the poppy? I think that would have to be a matter of personal choice and conscience. Since she brought footballers into the picture, I think it's worth noting that most foreign footballers wear a poppy with pride. Now, the great Ozzy Ardiles, a fantastic Argentinian footballer, he's actually a football manager these days, he even starred in a movie celebrating the resilience of Allied POWs. The Argentine sailors that I was privileged to serve alongside in various coalition operations were not only extremely professional, but they understood what Braidwood's missed. You see, war is horrific, but casualties aren't in and of themselves a war crime. They're the sacrifices that we make to win the peace at the end of the war. Dresden is another magic word that the Pink and Fluffy Brigade like to throw around. Now, it's easy to see why, because in isolation it was appalling. A series of massive strategic and tactical bombing raids, day and night, on one of Europe's cultural capitals. 25,000 civilians died in a city that was absolutely teeming with refugees. But there's more to it than that. The attack wasn't some random act of unusual cruelty inflicted by the Allies on the Germans. Dresden was a vital communications nexus between East and West. It was packed with untouched munitions works and factories. It was even suspected to house the Germans' chemical weapons stockpiles. Bombing 9 hells out of it was atrocious, but it was hardly a war crime. There were no smart bombs around in 1945. There was no practical way to destroy the roads, the power distribution and the manufacturing facilities without hitting the rest of the city, including those unfortunate refugees. Sympathy on the Allied side for the German citizenry was distinctly lacking, though. The Luftwaffe had been using terror bombing as a strategic role for a number of years. They had bombed entirely civilian targets, not legitimate military ones, with the sole intention of murdering large numbers of innocents so that they could incite fear and distress in the survivors. Now, if that effect was generated by destroying Dresden's roads and power supplies, the Allied leaders were fine with that. They'd take that as a bonus. You reap what you sow. Again, how would a modern German take it? Well, I don't know. But if you come from Dresden, then your twin city is Coventry. Coventry was bombed flat in 1940. It was still getting hit by rocket weapons in the closing months of the war. My guess is most Germans, and particularly Germans from Dresden, would take the whole Poppy thing with a certain level of resignation. It's fairly obvious to modern Germans that their leadership fought on when it was blatantly obvious that the war was lost. If there was a war crime at Dresden or anywhere else in northern Germany, it was the Nazi one, of not doing everything within their power to limit the damage that their aggression had brought down on Germany. When the Western Allies broke out of Normandy, the war was over. If they'd surrendered there and then, or at least sued for some kind of negotiation there and then, they could have spared millions of lives, including all the lives lost at Dresden. But I don't think that our pretty princess is actually interested in historical facts. She's decided that the Royal British Legion, she can't even get the fucking name right, bless her. She's decided that they're some kind of political organisation and they're responsible for future conflicts. She's strawmanning people she calls poppy fascists as defending our imperial past. Fucking really? I think I missed that memo. You know, make the world England isn't written over every door in the Legion. Fighting for ex-servicemen's rights is yet another crime in the eyes of the social justice wankers. They're perpetually offended by anything that reminds them that the whole fucking universe does not revolve around them and their petty little first world problems. Seeing a tube like Braidwood try to invoke the sacrifice of dead soldiers as justification for attacking an organisation working to protect their modern equivalents, it's fucking sickening. I'd love to see just one of these useless toe rags get irate about something worth talking about. The disgraceful lack of support for ex-servicemen and women leaves them incredibly vulnerable when they leave the armed services. Ridiculous numbers of them end up homeless, sleeping rough. While Salk just fights against the patriarchal oppression of fuck knows, summer air conditioning, brave men and women are sleeping on cardboard boxes, trying to stay dry enough to avoid hypothermia tonight. So spare a thought for them, guys. Winter's coming. And if you can spare some coin, well, so much the better. Doesn't have to be the Legion. There are a lot of ex-forces charities out there. I've left a few links below. So laters.